My wife said, "Don't be jealous. My ex-boyfriend is just giving me a ride home." I smiled and said, "No problem." 10 minutes later, my car's GPS showed her phone still connected to my Bluetooth. I pressed play. The conversation that came through those speakers made me pull over, park, and start recording. The next morning, she walked into an empty apartment and a lawyer waiting in the lobby. I smiled when she said it. That's the part I remember most clearly. Not the words themselves, though. God knows they've replayed in my head enough times since then. Not the way she kissed my cheek before she left, or how her perfume lingered in the doorway after she closed it. What I remember, what I can still feel in my chest like a splinter working its way deeper, is the smile I gave her. "Don't be jealous. My ex-boyfriend is just giving me a ride home." And I smiled. Wide, warm, the kind of smile that says, "I trust you completely, and I'm the cool husband, and I would never be one of those insecure men who checks his wife's phone or tracks her location or asks too many questions." "No problem," I said, "but be safe." She laughed, this light musical thing that used to make my stomach flip, and told me I was the best. Then she was gone, the apartment door clicking shut with a finality I didn't recognize at the time, but would later replay over and over, listening for the sound of an ending. If you've ever loved someone completely, you know what that smile cost me. You know how it feels to swallow doubt like broken glass, to perform trust while your gut screams that something is wrong, to choose faith over instinct because the alternative is too painful to consider. I sat there on our couch, the gray sectional we'd spent 3 weekends shopping for, arguing playfully about fabric swatches and leg styles, and I told myself I was being ridiculous. Miranda had been transparent about seeing her ex. She'd told me his name was Blake, that they'd dated in college, that he was in town for work and had offered her a ride home from her office since it was on his way. She'd shown me his text message, casual and friendly, nothing hidden. This is what trust looks like, I thought. This is what a healthy marriage looks like. I was proud of myself, honestly. Proud of my maturity, proud that I wasn't one of those controlling husbands you read about online. The ones who forbid their wives from having male friends or demand access to their social media accounts. I was evolved. I was secure. I was an idiot. 10 minutes after she left, I was scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself with work emails, when a notification popped up on my Cars app. My Tesla, the Model 3 I'd bought last year after a particularly good bonus, has this feature where it alerts you to various status updates. Usually it's boring stuff. Charging complete, software update available, cabin temperature adjusted. This notification said, "Phone connected via Bluetooth." I stared at it. Miranda had taken an Uber to work that morning because I'd needed the car for an early meeting. She didn't have the Tesla, so why was her phone? And then I understood. When you pair a phone with a car's Bluetooth system, it stays paired and connects automatically whenever the phone comes within range. Miranda's phone was in my car, which meant she wasn't in Blake's car at all. She'd taken my Tesla. She'd lied. The smile I'd given her 10 minutes earlier curdled in my memory, transforming from a gesture of trust into evidence of my own stupidity. My hands were shaking as I opened the Cars app fully, navigating to the GPS tracking feature. There it was, my car, moving through downtown, heading not toward our apartment in the Marina District, but toward the highway, southbound. Away from home. Toward what? I should have called her. That's what a rational person would do. But something stopped me. Maybe the memory of her laugh. So easy and light, when she'd lied to my face. Maybe the way she'd kissed my cheek. A Judas gesture, wrapped in affection. Or maybe it was something deeper, something primal. The hunter's instinct to stay quiet and watch. I opened the car's media controls. The Tesla's app is remarkable in its invasiveness, if you think about it. I can control almost everything remotely. The climate, the locks, the media system. I can see what's playing. I can even broadcast my voice through the speakers if I want, though I'd only used that feature once, to scare Miranda by pretending to be the car's AI when she was sitting in the parking lot. She'd laugh then, too. Now, looking at the media controls, I saw that nothing was playing. The radio was off. No music, no podcast, no navigation voice. Just silence or conversation or both. My thumb hovered over the button that would let me activate the microphone. The Tesla has cabin cameras and audio recording capability, ostensibly for security purposes. to capture footage in case of accidents or break-ins. But it also means that everything said inside the car can be heard through the app if you know how to access it. I knew how to access it. I pressed play. For a few seconds, there was nothing but road noise, the whisper of tires on asphalt, the subtle hum of the electric motor. I turned up my volume, pressed the phone to my ear, and waited. Then I heard her voice. Can't believe I actually did it. Miranda was laughing, that same musical sound, but there was something different about it now. Something I'd never heard before. A looseness, maybe, a freedom. I looked him right in the face and told him you were giving me a ride. He just smiled. God, he's so trusting, it's almost sad. A male voice responded, deep and amused. You feel guilty? No. Her answer came quickly, firmly. Should I? I'm just saying the guy clearly worships you. Worships me? Blake, he treats me like a roommate who occasionally gives him sex. Do you know how long it's been since he's actually surprised me, since he's done something spontaneous? He schedules our date nights in his Google Calendar. He color codes them. They both laughed. I was still smiling, I realized. Not the warm smile from earlier, but something else. Something fixed. My face felt frozen, like I'd had Novocaine injected into my cheeks. Besides, Miranda continued, and her voice dropped lower, intimate. You've always been better at making me feel alive. Remember that weekend in Napa? When I pulled over. I don't remember making the decision to do it. One moment I was sitting on the couch, phone pressed to my ear, and the next I was standing in our bedroom, yanking my laptop out of my work bag. The conversation continued in my earbuds. I'd switched to those so I could pace, so I could move, so I could do something with the energy crackling through my body like electricity. They were reminiscing, talking about their past together, their college romance, the way they'd broken up, mutual, amicable, just not the right timing. They talked about when they'd reconnected 6 months ago at a conference in Seattle where they'd both been presenting. 6 months. Does he know you were there? Blake asked. I told him it was a work thing. Which it was, technically. More laughter. I opened my laptop and navigated to the Tesla's security settings. The car keeps rolling recordings from all its cameras, front, rear, sides, interior. Usually they're only saved if there's an incident, a hard brake, a collision, a security alert. But you can also manually download footage from the past hour if you need it. I needed it. While the files downloaded, I listened to them discuss logistics, where they were going, a hotel in Pacifica, Ocean View, how long she could stay. She'd told me she had a late meeting, so she had until 10. Whether they needed to be careful, always, Blake said, but that was part of the thrill. I love my husband, Miranda said at one point, and my heart actually lurched with hope before she continued, but I love you too, differently. He's stable, reliable. He's my foundation. But you're my oxygen. You make me remember what it feels like to breathe. The poetry of it was almost impressive. The video files finished downloading. 4 angles, each showing the interior of my car with perfect clarity. I opened them, synced them, watched my wife climb into the driver's seat, watched Blake lean over to kiss her. Not a friendly peck, but the deep, familiar kiss of lovers. Watched her laugh and push him away playfully, glancing around the parking garage to make sure no one saw. Watched her drive my car, with my money's gas, to a hotel room paid for with. I checked her credit card statement, which I could access through our joint account management app. My credit card. She'd used our joint credit card. I started recording everything. The audio feed from the car, still playing through my earbuds. The video files, backed up to 3 separate drives, and my encrypted cloud storage. Screenshots of the credit card charges. The hotel booking made 3 days ago. The lingerie purchase from last week. I thought that was for me. The romantic restaurant reservation for 2 that she'd explained away as a business dinner. The evidence accumulated like snow, silent, steady, transforming the landscape into something unrecognizable. You ever think about what would happen if he found out? Blake asked. A pause, then. He won't. He's too trusting, too comfortable. He thinks he knows me, but he only knows the version of me I let him see. And which version is real? Maybe both, maybe neither. And does it matter? I sat down on the floor of our bedroom, surrounded by printouts and devices, and I realized I'd stopped feeling anything. The anger I'd expected, the rage, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it was all there, but distant, like watching a movie of someone else's life fall apart. What I felt instead was clarity, cold, perfect clarity. Miranda thought I was predictable, stable, too trusting. She thought she could manage me like she managed everything else in her life, her career, her image, her carefully curated social media presence. She thought I was the foundation while Blake was the thrill. She'd forgotten that foundations, when they shift, bring down entire buildings. I checked my watch, 8:47 p.m. She'd be back by 10, she'd said. That gave me just over an hour. I opened my laptop and started typing. People always ask me how I stayed so calm, how I managed to spend the next hour not screaming, not calling her, not driving to that hotel in Pacifica and making a scene worthy of reality television. The truth is simpler and more calculating than they want to hear. I stayed calm because I knew exactly what I was doing. You don't build a successful career in corporate law, specializing in contract disputes and asset protection, without learning how to weaponize documentation. My entire professional life revolves around one principle. Evidence is everything. Emotions fade, memories become unreliable, but documents are forever. So I documented everything. First, I secured all the recordings and videos, organizing them into clearly labeled folders with timestamps and descriptions. Audio file from 8:34 p.m. to 8:52 p.m. cataloging their conversation in my car. Video footage from 4 camera angles showing Blake kissing her laughing, their easy intimacy. I even captured screenshots of the GPS coordinates showing my car's route from her office to the hotel, with timestamps matching the audio. Then I went deeper. Our joint credit card statement revealed 6 months of deception. The hotel in Seattle she'd claimed was conference-provided accommodation? No. She'd booked her own room, a suite at the Four Seasons with late checkout. The work dinners she'd mentioned in passing, romantic restaurants in the city, reservations for two. The weekend she'd said she was visiting her college roommate in Portland. A boutique hotel in wine country, room service charges for champagne and oysters. She'd been careful, I had to give her that. The charges were spaced out, never obvious, always plausibly deniable if I'd questioned them. But I'd never questioned them. Why would I? I trusted her. That word tasted different now. Trust. Like something expired, gone rotten. I pulled our bank statements next, going back a full year. Miranda and I had always maintained financial transparency. We each had personal accounts for discretionary spending, but everything else flowed through joint accounts. It was a system we'd agreed on when we got married 3 years ago, a gesture of partnership and mutual commitment. Now I could see how she'd used that partnership as camouflage. There were Venmo transactions I'd never noticed. Payments to someone named B. Patterson labeled as splitting dinner or coffee or the especially bold paying you back. I searched Blake's full name on Facebook. Blake Patterson, 34, works in tech consulting, lives in San Jose, relationship status set to it's complicated. I screenshotted his profile, his photos, the comments Miranda had left on his posts over the past 6 months. Nothing explicit but telling in their consistency. Her favorite emoji, the one with the halo, appeared on almost every photo he posted. She'd liked his update about a work trip to Seattle. She'd commented, "Looks amazing," on his photo from Napa Valley. The breadcrumbs were all there. I'd just been too trusting, too comfortable, as she'd said, to look for them. By 9:15 p.m., I had assembled what my colleagues would call an airtight case. But evidence was only the first step. What mattered now was strategy. I opened a new document and titled it Asset Inventory and Protection Plan. Our apartment was leased under both our names, but I'd paid the security deposit and all the rent for the first year while Miranda was building her business. The furniture was mostly purchased by me, though she'd chosen most of it. The savings account had contributions from both of us, but I'd deposited significantly more. I earned about 60% of our combined income. We had no children, no shared property beyond the lease and the joint accounts, no complicated custody arrangements or long-term financial entanglements. On paper, we were easy to untangle. But I wasn't interested in easy. I was interested in thorough. I photographed every room in the apartment, documenting the contents, the condition, the evidence of our life together. The kitchen with the espresso machine I'd bought for her birthday. The living room with the art prints we'd chosen together in Carmel. The bedroom with the sheets we'd picked out, the bedside tables holding our books, the frame photo of our wedding day, both of us smiling like we'd won the lottery. Looking at that photo, I felt something crack in my chest, not my heart. That was still operating with mechanical efficiency. Something else. The illusion, maybe, the story I'd been telling myself about who we were. I took the photo off the wall and placed it face down in a drawer. Then I called my lawyer. David Chen had been my mentor when I first started at the firm, back when I was a nervous first-year associate who couldn't tell a tort from a contract. He'd since moved to a boutique family law practice, specializing in high-asset divorces. We met for drinks occasionally, comparing war stories from our respective legal trenches. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm with surprise. "Marcus, everything okay?" "I need a divorce attorney," I said. "Can you meet me tomorrow morning, early?" There was a pause. Then, "Of course, my office, 7 a.m. Make it 6:30, and David? This needs to be fast and quiet." "Understood." His voice had shifted into professional mode. "Don't do anything tonight. Don't confront her. Don't make accusations. Don't give her any indication that you know. Can you do that?" "Already done," I said. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of our apartment and took stock of what needed to happen next. Miranda would be home by 10. I needed to be here, needed to act normal, needed to smile at her the way I'd smiled when she left. The performance had to continue for just a few more hours. I could do that. After all, if she could lie to my face for 6 months, I could manage one night. I cleaned up all evidence of my evening's work, closed the laptop, put away the printed statements, tucked the external drives into my work bag. Then I ordered Thai food from her favorite restaurant, opened a bottle of wine, and queued up the Netflix show we'd been watching together, setting the stage. By 9:45, I was back on the couch, the same spot where I'd sat when she left, the same casual posture. The only difference was the phone in my pocket still recording audio from the car and the smile I was practicing in the black mirror of the television screen. It needed to look natural, welcoming, unsuspecting. I heard the key in the lock at 9:58 p.m. She looked beautiful when she walked through the door. That's what I remember thinking with a strange detached clarity as Miranda stepped into our apartment with windswept hair and flushed cheeks. She looked happy, alive, exactly the way she'd described feeling with Blake, like she could breathe. "Hey, babe." She dropped her bag by the door and kicked off her heels, the same routine as every other night. "Sorry I'm a bit late. Traffic was terrible coming back from the office." I smiled. "No worries." I ordered Thai, your usual pad see ew with extra broccoli. "You're the best." She came over and kissed my cheek, the same spot she'd kissed before she left, before she'd climbed into my car with another man and driven to a hotel where she'd used my credit card to commit to memory what oxygen feels like. I caught a different perfume mixing with her usual scent, something masculine, cedar and citrus. "How was the ride with Blake?" I asked, keeping my voice light, curious, the tone of a husband making conversation. "Oh, it was fine. He's exactly the same as I remembered. Kind of boring, actually. We talked about his work for like 40 minutes. I was ready to jump out at a stoplight." She laughed, heading to the kitchen to grab plates. "How was your evening?" "Quiet. Caught up on some emails, nothing exciting." The lies flowed between us like wine, filling our glasses with poison we both pretended was just another ordinary evening. We ate dinner on the couch, watching our show, some British mystery series that neither of us cared about but had become our default background noise. Miranda curled into her usual spot, her feet tucked under her, occasionally commenting on the plot or checking her phone. I watched her scroll through text messages, saw Blake's name appear on her screen followed by a heart emoji. She smiled, typed something back, then set the phone face down on the coffee table. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just Jenna being dramatic about her boyfriend again." Jenna was her best friend, the convenient excuse for countless text conversations I'd probably never actually questioned. "She should just dump him," I said, because that's what I always said about Jenna's eternally troubled relationship. "Right," Miranda agreed. "If you're not happy, just leave. Life's too short to settle for someone who doesn't make you feel alive." The irony was so thick I could taste it. We finished the episode. Miranda yawned and stretched, mentioning she had an early morning client call and should probably head to bed. I told her I'd be up in a bit, that I wanted to finish some work emails. She kissed my forehead, a gesture of casual affection, thoughtless as breathing, and disappeared into our bedroom. I sat in the dark living room, listening to her move through her nighttime routine, the water running in the bathroom, the closet door opening and closing, the bed creaking as she climbed in. My phone was still in my hand, still connected to the car's audio system, though the recording had long since gone silent after they'd parked at the hotel. I had everything I needed. The evidence was secured, the lawyer was briefed, the plan was in motion. All that remained was the execution. I set an alarm for 4:30 a.m. and stretched out on the couch, telling myself I'd sleep there to avoid disturbing Miranda since I'd be up so early. She called out from the bedroom, asking if I was sure, and I assured her I was fine. The truth was, I couldn't bear to lie next to her. Not tonight. Not when I knew where she'd been, whose hands had touched her, what promises they'd whispered to each other in my car, on my dime, during my marriage. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by dreams that felt like memories. Miranda laughing, Miranda walking down the aisle, Miranda telling me she loved me and I was her foundation. In the dreams, I smiled. Wide, warm, the smile of a man who trusts completely. The alarm buzzed at 4:30 a.m. I moved quietly through the apartment, gathering the essentials: laptop, external drives, my file of printed evidence, a change of clothes. Everything went into my work bag and a small suitcase I pulled from the hall closet. Miranda's breathing from the bedroom remained steady, undisturbed. Before I left, I did one final sweep. I removed my personal items from the bathroom: toothbrush, razor, the cologne she'd given me for Christmas. I took my books from the shelves, my framed photos from my side of the bedroom dresser, the watch my father had given me that usually sat on the nightstand. I wasn't cleaning out, not obviously, just removing the pieces of myself that mattered. At 5:15 a.m., I closed the apartment door behind me with the same quiet click she'd left me with the night before. The sunrise was just beginning to break over the city, painting the streets in shades of gold and pink. It would have been beautiful if I'd had the capacity to notice. Instead, I drove to David's office in Soma, parked in the garage, and rode the elevator to the 14th floor with my bag of evidence and my carefully maintained composure. And David was already there, coffee brewing, legal pads ready. "Tell me everything," he said. So I did. David listened to the audio recordings with the focused intensity of a surgeon examining an x-ray. He took notes in his precise handwriting, occasionally pausing the playback to ask clarifying questions. "This is her voice? You're certain? And the timestamp shows this occurred while she was claiming to be where? And you have video confirmation of this?" Yes. When I showed him the credit card statements, the hotel bookings, the Venmo transactions, he actually whistled, a low, impressed sound that made me feel simultaneously validated and hollow. "This is comprehensive," he said. "Almost too comprehensive. How long have you known?" "Since last night. I documented it all in real time." He looked at me over his reading glasses, the way he used to when I was his associate and had done something particularly clever or particularly stupid. With David, they were often the same thing. Most people in your situation spend weeks in denial, checking and rechecking, convincing themselves they're wrong. You went straight to evidence preservation and strategic planning. "I'm a lawyer," I said simply. "You're also a human being whose wife cheated on him. You're allowed to fall apart." "I'll fall apart after the divorce is final." David smiled, but it was sad. "That's what they all say. Then they end up in my office 3 months post-settlement, realizing they never actually processed anything." He tapped his pen against the legal pad. "But that's a conversation for another day. Right now, we need to talk about what you want." "I want out, fast, clean. I don't want alimony. Don't want to drag this through courts for months. Don't want to play the victim in front of a judge." "What do you want?" he repeated, emphasis on the you. I thought about it. What did I want? I want her to understand what she threw away, not because I'm trying to hurt her, but because she actually doesn't know. She thinks I'm stable and boring and predictable. She thinks foundation means expendable. I want her to realize— I paused, searching for the right words. I want her to realize that foundations don't just hold things up. When they're gone, everything collapses. David wrote something down. Poetic. Also vindictive. I can work with that. He looked up. Here's what we're going to do. California is a no-fault divorce state, which means the affair doesn't technically matter for the legal proceedings, but it matters for leverage and timeline. We're going to file today. I'll have the papers ready by noon. Then we're going to have them served. When? This evening, at your apartment, by a process server who will be very professional and very thorough. You can make that happen in one day? Marcus, I've been doing this for 20 years. I can make a lot of things happen in one day. He pulled out a fresh legal pad. But first, we need to discuss assets. Walk me through everything. We spent the next 2 hours itemizing my marriage, the joint accounts, roughly $85,000 saved. The retirement funds, separate though accumulated during the marriage, the furniture and belongings, the lease on the apartment, month to month, thankfully, the car, titled in my name only. The car, David said. That's the Tesla, correct? The one where you discovered everything? Yes. You'll want to keep that. For sentimental reasons. His tone was dry. It's evidence, I said. It's a trophy, he corrected. And there's nothing wrong with that. In divorce, we take our victories where we can find them. By 8 a.m., we had a draft separation agreement. By 10 a.m., David had filed the initial divorce petition with the San Francisco Superior Court. By noon, a process server named Julio was sitting in David's office, reviewing the details of where and how to serve Miranda. The apartment lobby, I said. Tomorrow morning. She always leaves for work at 8:15. There's a doorman, Carlos. He'll let you wait inside. You want the doorman to witness this? David asked. I want her to understand this isn't impulsive. This is planned. This is what happens when you underestimate your foundation. David and Julio exchanged a look. Your ex-wife is going to tell everyone you're a sociopath, David said conversationally. My soon-to-be ex-wife spent 6 months sleeping with someone else using my money in my car. She can say whatever she wants. I left David's office at 1 p.m. with copies of all the filing documents, a timeline of what would happen next, and a peculiar sense of floating outside my own body. Everything was in motion now. The machinery of legal dissolution was grinding forward with the inevitability of continental drift. I couldn't go back to the apartment. Not yet. Not until Miranda had left for work. Instead, I drove to Ocean Beach, parked the Tesla on the Great Highway, and walked along the shore. The fog was rolling in, thick and gray, muffling the sound of the waves. I thought about Miranda's words from the night before. He's stable, reliable. He's my foundation, but you're my oxygen. What a thing to say. What a way to divide a person into component parts, keeping the useful bits while outsourcing the rest. As if stability was boring by definition, as if reliability was the opposite of passion rather than its prerequisite. I'd given her everything I had, my trust, my time, my money, my belief in our future together. I'd built my life around the assumption that we were building something together, that the foundation I was providing was for both of us, that the stability I offered was the ground from which she could reach higher. And she'd taken it all and decided it wasn't enough. Or maybe it was too much. Maybe foundations make people feel trapped rather than supported. Maybe I'd never understand. The ocean stretched out forever and indifferent to my revelation or my pain. I stood there until my hands were numb from the cold and my shoes were soaked from the tide, and then I got back in the car and drove to a hotel near the airport. Neutral territory, away from our neighborhood and our life and any possibility of running into her accidentally. I checked in under my own name, went up to the room, and finally let myself feel it. The anger came first, hot and clarifying. I paced the small hotel room, replaying every moment of the previous night. Her laugh, her lies, her easy intimacy with Blake, the way she'd kissed my cheek, the way she'd eaten Thai food on our couch and curled her feet under her like nothing was wrong. Then came the grief, heavy and unexpected. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and cried, not decorously, not quietly, but in great gasping sobs that felt like they were being pulled from somewhere deep in my chest. I cried for the marriage I'd thought I had, for the wife I'd believed in, for the future we'd planned that would never exist now. I cried because I'd loved her, and part of me, some stupid foundational part, still did. By evening, I'd cycled through to something else. Not acceptance, not yet. But a kind of grim determination. Tomorrow morning, Miranda would wake up in our apartment, get ready for work, and walk into the lobby to find a process server waiting with divorce papers and a smile. And I wouldn't be there to see it. But I'd prepared something else. I've never been good at sleeping in hotels. Something about the unfamiliar sounds, the air conditioning that's either too cold or too warm, the sheets that feel wrong against my skin. It all combines to keep me in a shallow, restless state that isn't quite sleep and isn't quite waking. So, when my alarm went off at 6 a.m., I'd already been staring at the ceiling for an hour, running through the day's choreography in my mind. By 6:30, I was showered and dressed in my work suit, navy blue, the one Miranda always said made me look like a real grown-up. By 7, I was in a coffee shop 3 blocks from our apartment, laptop open, pretending to work while I waited for David's text. The plan was precise. Julio, the process server, would enter our building at 8 a.m., check in with Carlos the doorman, and position himself in the lobby. And I'd called Carlos the night before. We'd always had a friendly rapport, and I'd occasionally tipped him well during holidays, and explained that someone would be delivering important legal documents to my wife in the morning. "Is everything okay, Mr. Rivers?" he'd asked, concern evident in his voice. "It will be," I'd said. Now, sitting in the coffee shop with my third espresso, I realized I was nervous. Not about the divorce itself. That machinery was already in motion, inevitable as sunrise. No, I was nervous about Miranda's reaction. How she'd look when Julio handed her the papers, what she'd say. Whether she'd cry or rage or laugh or simply go numb the way I had. I hated that I still cared about her emotional state. But caring doesn't stop just because someone betrayed you. That's the cruel joke of love. It lingers long after it should have died, like a phantom limb that aches even though it's gone. At 7:45, David texted, "Julio is in position. Recording device active." I'd asked David to have Julio wear a body camera, ostensibly for legal protection, to document that service was properly executed, but really I wanted to see her face. I needed to see the moment she realized that her stable, predictable, boring husband had just dismantled their marriage in less than 24 hours. At 8:14, my phone buzzed with a video file. I couldn't watch it, not there, not in public, not where someone might see my face when I saw hers. So I packed up my laptop, walked back to my hotel, locked the door, and sat on the bed with my phone. Then I pressed play. The video was shot from Julio's chest height, showing the elegant lobby of our apartment building. Carlos stood behind the concierge desk, looking uncomfortable, but professional. A few other residents passed through. A woman in yoga clothes, a man walking a small dog. And then there she was, Miranda. She looked exactly as she did every morning. Hair pulled back in a low ponytail, wearing her work uniform of black trousers and a silk blouse, messenger bag slung over her shoulder. She was checking her phone as she walked, smiling at something on the screen. Blake, I thought. She's texting Blake. "Ms. Rivers?" Julio stepped forward, holding a manila envelope. She looked up, confused. "Yes?" "I have documents for you. Please confirm your full name, Miranda Elizabeth Rivers." "That's me, but I don't understand." "You've been served." Julio handed her the envelope and a receipt to sign. "These are divorce proceedings initiated by Marcus James Rivers. The documents inside include the petition for dissolution of marriage, a property settlement proposal, and information about your legal rights and options. You have 30 days to respond." I watched her face go through a series of transformations, each lasting only a second, but feeling like an eternity through the camera. Confusion, disbelief, shock, anger, and finally something I couldn't quite identify. Calculation, maybe? Or perhaps just the dawning understanding that I knew. "There must be some mistake," she said, her voice tight. "My husband, where is my husband?" "I'm just the messenger, ma'am. The documents include contact information for his attorney if you have questions." Julio held out a pen for her to sign the receipt. "I need to call him." She was fumbling for her phone, nearly dropping it. There's been a misunderstanding. Ma'am, I need you to sign this receipt confirming you've received the documents." "I'm not signing anything until I talk to Marcus." Her voice had risen, and I could see Carlos shifting uncomfortably at his desk. 2 other residents had entered the lobby and were trying very hard to pretend they weren't watching the scene unfold. "You can refuse to sign," Julio said calmly. But that doesn't change the fact that you've been legally served. I have video evidence of this delivery. However, your signature simply confirms receipt. It doesn't indicate agreement with the contents. Miranda grabbed the pen and scrawled her name across the receipt, then tore the envelope open right there in the lobby. I watched her pull out the documents, her eyes scanning the first page, the petition for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and requesting an equitable division of assets. Then she pulled out the second packet, and I saw her face go white. Those were the photographs. The printouts of credit card statements, the timeline I'd created showing her 6-month affair with Blake, complete with dates, locations, and amounts spent. I'd included it all in the service package, not because it was legally necessary. California's no-fault divorce didn't require proof of adultery, but because I wanted her to know that I knew everything. "Where is he?" she asked again, but quieter now, defeated. "I wasn't given that information, ma'am." Miranda looked up at Carlos, who suddenly became very interested in paperwork on his desk. She looked around the lobby at the other residents, who quickly averted their eyes. Then she looked down at the papers in her hands, at the evidence of her own deception laid out in neat chronological order. "Fuck," she whispered. The video ended there. Julio's job was done, the service confirmed and documented. But I sat on the hotel bed for a long time afterward, staring at the frozen final frame. Miranda standing in our lobby, surrounded by neighbors and doormen, and the ordinary morning bustle of city life, holding the pieces of our marriage in her hands. My phone rang. Miranda. I let it go to voicemail. She called again, 7 times in the span of 10 minutes. Then the text started. "Marcus, please call me. This is insane. We need to talk. You can't just do this. At least give me a chance to explain I love you, please." Each message arrived with a chime, and each chime felt like a small victory. Not because I enjoyed her pain, I didn't, not really, but because for the first time since I'd heard her laughing in my car, I felt like I had some control over the narrative. She'd spent 6 months lying to me, managing me, treating me like a fixed feature of her landscape while she explored more exciting terrain. She'd thought I was predictable, that my trust was automatic, that my stability meant I'd never fight back. She'd forgotten that stability isn't the same as weakness, and that foundations, when they decide to move, can level everything above them. I texted back once, brief and final. All communication goes through my attorney. His information is in the documents. Then I blocked her number. David called 5 minutes later. I just heard from her lawyer. She already hired someone. She called Bruce Hoffman. He's good, expensive, and aggressive. This won't be easy. I don't need easy. What did he say? He's claiming you ambushed her, that you're being vindictive, that the timeline is unnecessarily rushed. He wants a meeting. You, me, Miranda, and him to discuss a more amicable approach. Tell him no. Marcus, tell him no. She had 6 months to be amicable. She chose to spend that time fucking someone else in my car. We proceed as planned. David was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'll tell him. But be prepared. This is going to get ugly. She's going to fight and she's going to try to control the narrative. You need to stay clean, stay calm, and let me handle the legal strategy." "I'm always calm," I said. And it was true. The rage from yesterday had burned itself out, leaving behind something colder and more durable. Purpose? Maybe, or just the absence of illusion. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and started a new document. David had suggested I keep a journal throughout the divorce process. Not for therapy, though he'd recommended that too, but for documentation. Every interaction with Miranda, every development in the case, every moment of clarity or doubt, all of it recorded, time-stamped, potentially useful. I titled it The Dissolution and began to write. The thing about ending a marriage is that it's never just about the marriage. It's about unraveling an entire life. The shared friends who now have to choose sides, and the family members who feel betrayed on your behalf, the routines and rituals and small domestic habits that defined your days. It's about becoming singular again after years of being plural. About sleeping alone in hotel rooms and cooking for one, and sitting in coffee shops on Saturday mornings with nobody to argue playfully about whether pancakes or waffles are superior. Pancakes, for the record. Miranda preferred waffles. This had been a running joke in our relationship. The great breakfast debate. Now it was just another memory turned artifact. The first week after I served Miranda with divorce papers, I lived in that airport hotel, working remotely and avoiding our neighborhood entirely. My colleagues at the firm knew something was wrong. I'd always been private about my personal life, but the sudden shift from occasional work from home days to complete remote isolation was obvious. But no one pressed me for details, except Sarah. Sarah Chen was a senior partner at the firm, one of the few people I'd call a genuine friend rather than just a colleague. She'd been through 2 divorces herself and had a particular radar for emotional catastrophe masquerading as professional efficiency. She video called me on Friday afternoon, her face appearing on my screen with an expression of pointed concern. "You look like shit," she said without preamble. "Hello to you, too. When's the last time you slept or ate something that wasn't delivered in a plastic container?" I glanced at the hotel room around me. The unmade bed, the empty takeout boxes stacked on the desk, the clothes I'd been rotating for a week. "I'm fine." "You're really not. What happened?" So I told her. Not everything. I wasn't ready to voice the whole betrayal in narrative form, but enough. Miranda cheated, I found out. I filed for divorce. I'm living in a hotel until we figure out the apartment situation. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from concern to recognition to a particular kind of sympathetic fury. "That fucking sucks," she said when I finished. "Also, you served her in the lobby, with her doorman watching? Marcus, that's stone cold." "She used my car to drive to a hotel with him, while I sat at home trusting her." "Fair point. How are you feeling?" It was the question I'd been avoiding asking myself. "Honestly, I don't know, angry mostly, but also relieved, like I've been holding my breath for 6 months without realizing it, and now I can finally exhale." "That's the gaslighting effect," Sarah said. "Even when you don't consciously know something's wrong, your body knows. Your instincts know. You were probably picking up on inconsistencies for months, little things that didn't quite add up, but you explained them away because you trusted her. That landed like a punch, because she was right. I'd noticed things. Miranda being more secretive with her phone, working later more often, being less interested in sex. I'd attributed it all to work stress, to the natural ebb and flow of a long-term relationship, to anything except the obvious explanation. I'd chosen trust over instinct, and instinct had been right all along. "What do I do now?" I asked. "Now?" Sarah leaned back in her chair. "Now you take care of yourself. You get a therapist. I'll send you 3 names. All excellent. You find a proper apartment, not a hotel. You let yourself be sad and angry and whatever else comes up. And you let your lawyer handle the legal shit while you focus on not falling apart. I'm not falling apart. Marcus, you're living in an airport hotel, eating takeout, and avoiding everyone you know. You're in the denial phase of falling apart, which is fine. Denial is useful for getting through the initial shock, but eventually you need to actually process this." I didn't want to process it. Processing meant feeling it. And feeling it meant admitting how much it hurt, and admitting how much it hurt meant acknowledging that Miranda had fundamentally changed my understanding of myself and my judgment and my ability to trust my own perception of reality. But I said, "Okay, I'll call the therapists." "Good. And Marcus, I'm proud of you for leaving. A lot of people would have stayed, would have tried to fix it, would have accepted the gaslighting and the excuses. You saw the evidence and you acted. That takes guts." After we hung up, I sat with that for a while. Guts. Was that what this was? It felt more like self-preservation, like jumping from a burning building, not because you're brave, but because staying means dying. That weekend, I apartment hunted. I couldn't keep living in hotels, and I wasn't going back to our place. The lease was month to month, and we'd agreed through our lawyers that Miranda would stay there until we finalized the separation agreement. She'd pay the full rent. I'd take a furniture credit. I found a 1-bedroom in Lower Pack Heights, smaller than our Marina apartment but brighter, with hardwood floors and a view of the park. It was available immediately. The previous tenant had broken their lease to move to New York, and the landlord, an older woman named Mrs. Kowalski, who reminded me of my grandmother, seemed pleased to rent to someone with stable employment and no drama. If only she knew. I moved in with almost nothing. My clothes, my laptop, my evidence files, backed up in 3 locations but still physically present, like talismans, and a mattress delivered from IKEA. The emptiness of the space was actually comforting. No shared memories, no ghosts of other conversations, no furniture we'd chosen together. Just blank walls and possibility. My first night there, I slept 12 hours straight. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings ground forward with the mechanical efficiency David had promised. Miranda's attorney, Bruce Hoffman, had initially tried to stall, claiming we needed mediation, counseling, a cooling off period, but David had been immovable. California doesn't require waiting periods beyond the statutory 6 months between filing and final judgment, and we weren't required to attempt reconciliation. Miranda could contest the divorce, but she couldn't stop it. The settlement negotiations were more complicated. Our assets weren't extensive. We'd been married only 3 years, both in our early 30s, still building our careers and savings. But everything was entangled. The bank accounts, the credit cards, the retirement contributions made during the marriage. Bruce proposed a 50-50 split of everything, including the Tesla. David laughed when he read that. He's testing us, seeing if you'll be reasonable. The Tesla is titled in my name, and I bought it before we got married. It's separate property. He knows that, but he also knows it accumulated value during the marriage, which technically makes the appreciation community property. How much appreciation? About $15,000. He wants 7.5. I thought about it. $7,500 to make Miranda go away, to finish this quickly, to never have to sit across from her at a settlement conference or in a courtroom. Counteroffer, I said. I keep the Tesla. She gets an extra 7.5 from the joint savings. That's more than the appreciation amount. And it means we don't have to get a valuation or argue about depreciation or any of it. That's generous. That's strategic. I want this over, David. Every day this drags on is another day she has leverage to drag it out further. He drafted the counter proposal that afternoon. Bruce accepted it 2 days later. By the end of the second week, we had a settlement agreement. I'd keep the Tesla, my retirement account, and my personal belongings. Miranda would keep her retirement account, her personal belongings, and stay in the apartment until the lease ended. We'd split the joint savings, roughly $42,000 each after I gave her the extra for the car appreciation. No alimony, no debt division, no ongoing financial relationship. Clean, simple, over. All that remained was the 6-month waiting period mandated by California law, and then we'd be officially divorced. You could have gone harder, David said when we reviewed the final agreement. With the evidence you have of her affair and financial infidelity, a judge might have been sympathetic. You could have argued for a more favorable split. I don't want favorable. I want finished. Most people want both. Most people haven't spent 3 weeks documenting every lie, David. I've already won. She knows I know everything. She knows I left without hesitation. She knows that her stable, boring husband was capable of dismantling their entire life together in 24 hours. I signed the settlement agreement with a flourish. Taking an extra few $1,000s doesn't change that. What I didn't tell David, what I hadn't told anyone, was that the evidence files were still on my computer, still backed up, still accessible. And the settlement agreement included a standard non-disparagement clause. Neither of us would publicly badmouth the other, share details of the marriage, or divorce, or interfere with the other's personal or professional life. But it didn't say I had to delete the evidence. I wasn't planning to use it. Probably. But having it felt like insurance. Like keeping a fire extinguisher under the sink. You hope you'll never need it, but you sleep better knowing it's there. The therapist Sarah had recommended. Dr. Patricia Wong, who specialized in relationship trauma and high-achieving professionals, asked me about this in our third session. You've described the evidence collection very analytically, she said, her voice gentle but probing, like you were building a legal case rather than processing a betrayal. Do you think that helped you cope with the shock, or did it help you avoid feeling the shock? I considered this. We were sitting in her office in the Presidio, sunlight streaming through the windows, everything calm and professionally soothing. Both, I said finally. Collecting evidence gave me something to do, something to control, when everything else felt chaotic. But it also let me stay in my head instead of my heart. And now, the evidence is collected, the divorce is filed, the settlement is agreed. There's nothing left to control. How does that feel? Terrifying, I admitted, because now I have to sit with what actually happened. She didn't just cheat, she lied to my face for 6 months. She used my car, my money, my trust. She told another man that I was boring, that I was just a foundation while he was oxygen. And the worst part is, I still don't understand why. What was so wrong with stable, with reliable, with being someone she could count on? Dr. Wong was quiet for a moment. Then, maybe nothing was wrong with it. Maybe stable and reliable were exactly what she needed from you, so she could feel safe enough to be reckless somewhere else. You were her home base, Marcus. And for some people, having a secure home base makes them feel entitled to adventure. The insight cracked something open in my chest. That's not love. No, she agreed. That's not love. That's using someone. And you didn't deserve that. I cried in her office that day. Not the gasping sobs from the hotel room, but quieter tears that felt like they were washing something away. 3 weeks after I served Miranda with divorce papers, she broke the non-contact order. Not officially, there was no restraining order, no legal prohibition on communication. But David had been clear. All contact goes through the attorneys. No direct messages, no phone calls, no just wanting to talk conversations that could be misinterpreted or used against either of us later. Miranda sent me an email. It arrived on a Wednesday evening while I was attempting to cook dinner in my new apartment. Attempting being the operative word, since my culinary skills had always been mediocre and had apparently not improved through divorce. I was staring at a pan of something that was supposed to be chicken stir-fry, but looked more like a crime scene, when my phone chimed with the email notification. Subject: please read this, I almost deleted it. David would have told me to delete it, to forward it to him unread, to maintain the boundaries we'd established. But I opened it. Marcus, I know I'm not supposed to contact you directly. I know you hate me, and I know I deserve that. But I need to say some things, and I need you to hear them, even if you never respond. I'm sorry. I know that word feels inadequate, but I don't know what else to say. I'm sorry for lying to you. I'm sorry for betraying your trust. I'm sorry for using your car and your credit card and your goodness against you. I'm sorry for every moment of the last 6 months where I looked you in the eye and pretended everything was normal. But I need you to understand something. This wasn't about you not being enough. You are everything a partner should be. You're kind and smart and generous and stable in all the ways that matter. The problem wasn't you, the problem was me. I've been seeing a therapist, at Bruce's insistence, but also because I genuinely need to understand what the hell I was thinking. She asked me why I cheated when I had a good marriage, when I loved my husband, when I had no real complaints about our life together, and I realized I didn't know who I was anymore. We got married when I was 28. I went straight from my parents' house to college, to grad school, to you. I've never been alone, Marcus. I've never been just myself, without someone else's expectations shaping me. And Blake represented something from before. Before I was a wife, before I had responsibilities, before I became this person who color codes her calendar and meal preps on Sundays and has a retirement plan. I'm not saying this to excuse what I did. There is no excuse. But I'm trying to explain it because I think you deserve to understand that when I said you were my foundation, I meant it. Are the best thing that had ever happened to me. And I destroyed it because I was too cowardly to tell you I was struggling, too selfish to end things properly, too afraid of losing my safety net to admit I needed to figure out who I was without it. Blake is gone, by the way. I ended things with him the day you served me. He wasn't what I thought he was. Or maybe he was exactly what I thought, and what I thought I wanted was just an escape from having to be a grown-up. Either way, it's over. I know you won't forgive me. I'm not asking you to. I'm not even asking you to respond to this email. I just needed you to know that you didn't do anything wrong. You were perfect. You were exactly what I asked for. And I threw it away because I was too broken to appreciate it. I hope you find someone who deserves your stability. Someone who understands that foundation isn't boring. It's essential. Someone who doesn't confuse reliability with predictability or loyalty with complacency. I hope you're happy, Marcus. You deserve that, Miranda. I read it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop, turned off the stove, and walked out of my apartment. I didn't have a destination in mind, just a need to move, to be somewhere other than alone with that email and my thoughts. I ended up at the Presidio, walking the trails as the sun set over the Golden Gate Bridge. The fog was rolling in, swallowing the bridge towers in gray mist, and the air smelled like eucalyptus and salt water. Her email was honest. I believed that. The therapy speak felt genuine. The self-awareness seemed real. She was trying to take responsibility, trying to help me understand, but understanding didn't change anything. She'd still lied. She'd still chosen every single day for 6 months to continue the deception. She'd had countless opportunities to tell me she was struggling, that she felt lost, that she needed space or therapy or whatever it was she needed. Instead, she'd kept me in the dark while she figured herself out with someone else. And her explanation that she'd never been alone, never been just herself, was it supposed to make me feel better? Was I supposed to feel grateful that my wife had seen our marriage as a cage rather than a partnership? That my stability was something she needed to escape from rather than build upon? Dr. Wong had warned me about this. She'll reach out eventually, she'd said in our last session, either to apologize or to explain or to try to get closure, and you'll have to decide, do you engage or do you hold your boundary? What should I do? That depends on what you need. If you need answers, engagement might help. If you need peace, boundaries are better. I thought about what I needed, standing there in the Presidio as the fog consumed the bridge. I needed to not care anymore. I needed Miranda's motivations and struggles and self-discovery journey to be irrelevant to my life. I needed to stop parsing her words for hidden meaning. Stop wondering if she really meant what she said. Stop hoping for the apology that would make everything make sense. Because there was no apology that would do that. Understanding why she cheated didn't uncheat her. Knowing she was broken didn't repair the trust she'd shattered. Her email was honest, but honesty after months of lies isn't redemption. It's just better late than never. I pulled out my phone and typed a response. Miranda, I received your email. Thank you for the honesty. It doesn't change anything, but I appreciate the effort. I'm not interested in understanding why you did what you did. Therapy is helping you make sense of it, and I'm glad for that. But your self-discovery isn't my responsibility anymore. You said I was perfect, that I didn't do anything wrong. You're right, I didn't. And that's exactly why I'm not interested in rebuilding any kind of relationship. Friendship, closure, whatever you might eventually want. Because perfect wasn't enough for you. And I refuse to spend my life trying to be more than perfect for someone who couldn't appreciate what they had. I hope you figure yourself out. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. But I need you to understand. I'm done being your foundation. I'm building something else now, something just for me. Don't contact me again. Marcus, I sent it before I could second guess myself, then immediately forwarded both her email and my response to David with a note. She broke no contact. I responded once, won't happen again. He replied within minutes. Understood. Good boundaries. Let me know if she pushes back. She didn't. That was the last direct communication Miranda and I had during the entire divorce process. Everything else went through David and Bruce. The final settlement details, the division of some books we'd both claimed, the return of a few items she'd accidentally taken that belonged to me, the machinery of uncoupling ground forward, paperwork accumulating like sediment, until finally, 5.5 months after I'd served her in the lobby, David called me with the news. It's done, he said. The judge signed the final dissolution. As of today, you're officially divorced. That's it? That's it. No more waiting period, no more settlement negotiations, no more shared anything. You're legally single, Marcus. I was sitting in my apartment, no longer new, just my apartment now, with takeout Thai food from a different restaurant than Miranda and I used to order from. The evening light was coming through the windows, golden and warm, and I could hear the sounds of the city below. Traffic, voices, someone playing music in another unit. And how do you feel? David asked. Freed, I said, and meant it. People expect divorce to feel like an ending, like closing a book, turning off a light, walking away from a burning building. And maybe for some people it does. For me, it felt like construction, not the destruction I'd orchestrated that night when I discovered Miranda's betrayal. That had been demolition, necessary and surgical. No, this was the aftermath, the clearing away of rubble, the assessment of what could be salvaged, the slow, deliberate process of building something new on ground that had been leveled. I threw myself into it with the same intensity I'd applied to documenting the affair. New apartment, new routines, new versions of myself that had nothing to do with being someone's husband. I started running, something I'd never done consistently before. Every morning at 6, I'd lace up the expensive shoes the guy at the running store had insisted I needed, and I'd head to Crissy Field. The first week, I could barely make it a mile without stopping. By month 2, I was running 5 miles along the waterfront, watching the sunrise over the bay, feeling my lungs burn and my legs ache and my mind finally blessedly quiet. I took a cooking class at the community center, Essential Skills for Kitchen Confidence, which was mostly attended by recent college graduates and divorced men in their 40s. I was right in between, the only participant in his early 30s, and the instructor, a cheerful woman named Rosa, took particular delight in teaching me the difference between sautéing and pan frying. "Your wife never taught you this?" she asked one evening, watching me attempt to dice an onion. "My ex-wife did most of the cooking, I did most of the cleaning, and now I'm learning to do both." I started saying yes to things I'd previously declined: Sarah Chen's monthly poker night with other attorneys from the firm, a book club that met in a wine bar in the Mission, a weekend trip to Tahoe with some college friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. That last one was particularly revelatory. I hadn't realized how much of my social life had been filtered through Miranda, her friends, her preferences, her comfort level. Going to Tahoe with my own friends, having conversations that didn't involve her or reference her or require me to consider her perspective, felt like speaking a language I'd forgotten I knew. "You seem different," my friend Jason said on the second night, after we'd spent the day skiing and were now drinking whiskey by the fire at our rental cabin. "Different how?" "Lighter, maybe, or more yourself. I don't know how to explain it. You were always a bit muted when you were with Miranda, like you were constantly managing her mood or anticipating what she needed." I hadn't thought of it that way. But he was right. I'd spent so much energy trying to be the stable foundation that I'd forgotten how to be anything else. How to be impulsive or silly or selfish. How to want things without first considering how they'd affect her. "She cheated," I said, "for 6 months. I found out, filed for divorce, and served her papers within 24 hours. Jason nearly choked on his whiskey. "Jesus, Marcus, I had no idea. Are you okay?" "Yeah, actually, I mean, it sucked. It still sucks sometimes. But I'm okay." And I was. Not healed. Healing isn't linear, Dr. Wong kept reminding me. But okay in a fundamental way I hadn't been even before I knew about the affair. Because this okayness wasn't dependent on someone else's behavior or choices. It was mine, built on my own foundation. 6 months post-divorce, I got a promotion at work. Senior associate to partner track with the raise and responsibility that came with it. Sarah took me out for celebratory drinks at a cocktail bar downtown, and we toasted to new beginnings. "You've really landed on your feet," she said, studying me over her martini. "Most people take at least a year to feel human again after a divorce. You're already thriving." "I don't know about thriving. I still eat cereal for dinner twice a week. So does everyone who lives alone. That's not a divorce thing. That's an adult thing," she smiled. "I'm proud of you, Marcus. You could have let this destroy you. Instead, you're running marathons and getting promoted and generally kicking ass at life. It's impressive." "I'm not running marathons, just 5Ks. Still counts." That night, walking home through the city, I'd moved again to a larger one-bedroom in Russian Hill with a view of the bay that made me feel like I'd made it, whatever it meant. I thought about what Sarah had said. Was I thriving? I was certainly busy. Between work and running and cooking classes and social obligations I'd previously declined, my calendar was fuller than it had been in years. But was busy the same as thriving? Dr. Wong and I had talked about this in therapy, the tendency to fill the void with productivity, to avoid processing by staying perpetually occupied. "Activity isn't the same as healing," she'd said. "Sometimes you need to sit with the discomfort. Let yourself feel the loss, the anger, the sadness, all the emotions you've been very effectively managing instead of experiencing." "I've experienced them," I'd protested. "I cried, I felt angry, I went through all the stages." "Did you? Or did you go through the legally necessary stages of ending a marriage while keeping the emotional stages at arm's length?" I'd hated how accurately she could read me. So that night, instead of turning on the TV or opening my laptop or texting friends, I sat in my apartment with the lights off and let myself feel it. I missed her. Not the woman who'd lied to me, not the wife who'd use my car to drive to her ex-boyfriend. I missed the woman I'd thought she was, the partner I'd believed we were building a life with, the future we'd planned that involved kids and a house and growing old together. That version of Miranda had never existed. But I'd loved her anyway, had built my life around the assumption of her, had trusted in a foundation that turned out to be sand. And that loss, the loss of the illusion of the future, of my own naivety, that was worth grieving. I let myself cry for it. Not the gasping sobs from the hotel room, not the quiet tears from therapy, just tears running down my face while I sat in the dark and acknowledged that something I'd loved was gone and wouldn't be coming back. When I was done, I felt emptier, but also cleaner somehow, like I'd finally washed away the last residue of that marriage. I slept well that night. I ran into Miranda 14 months after the divorce was finalized. It was bound to happen eventually. San Francisco is a big city, but the professional circles we moved in had significant overlap. She worked in marketing for a tech startup. I worked in corporate law for tech companies. We attended the same conferences, frequented the same restaurants, had friends in the same industries. I'd been half expecting it, half dreading it, this inevitable collision of past and present. It happened at a fundraiser for a local nonprofit that Sarah had dragged me to. I'd been resisting these kinds of events. Too much small talk, too much performance of professional success. But she'd insisted, claiming I needed to network my way out of being a hermit. You can't live on running and takeout forever, she'd said. Watch me. But I'd gone anyway. Wearing my Navy suit, the one Miranda used to say made me look like a real grown-up, and my most confident smile. The fundraiser was at a gallery in Soma, all exposed brick and modern art and tech money, trying to prove it had cultural taste. I was talking to a potential client about their contract negotiations when I saw her. Miranda stood across the room, laughing at something a tall man in an expensive suit was saying. She looked exactly the same. Same hair, same professional polish, same animated expressions, but also different. Thinner, maybe, or just older. We all looked older. Our eyes met across the gallery. For a second, neither of us moved. The world narrowed to just that recognition, that shared history crackling in the space between us. Then she smiled, tentative, uncertain, and started walking toward me. I excused myself from the contract conversation and met her halfway. Marcus, hi. Her voice was the same. How was her voice still the same? Miranda, how are you? I'm good, really good actually. She paused, glancing at the man in the expensive suit, who was now talking to someone else. I'm dating someone. It's still new, but it's healthy, good. Different from... Another pause. Different from before. I'm glad you're happy. Are you happy? I considered the question. Was I happy? I was successful, social, physically healthy, mentally stable. I had friends and hobbies and a job that I was good at. I'd stopped having nightmares about finding text messages and credit card statements. I'd stopped checking my rearview mirror obsessively when I drove, afraid I'd see her car following me. Yeah, I said. I think I am. Good. That's good. She twisted her hands together, a nervous gesture I remembered from when we were dating. Listen, I know this is weird, and I know I said I wouldn't contact you, but I need to say something. Miranda, please, just let me say this. She took a breath. I was wrong, not just about cheating. I know I was wrong about that. I've apologized for that. But I was wrong about you, about us, about what stability means. You don't have to do this. I know, but I need to because I spent 6 months in therapy unpacking why I destroyed our marriage, and I realized something. I told you I needed to find myself, that I needed to be alone, that I was too young when we got married, but that was bullshit. The truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of how much I needed you, of how completely I'd built my life around you, of the fact that you were genuinely good to me, and I didn't know how to accept that without waiting for the other shoe to drop. So I dropped it myself. I sabotaged us, because at least that way I was in control of when it ended. I stared at her. That's the most self-aware thing I've ever heard you say. She laughed, but it was sad. Therapy is expensive and effective. Who knew? She glanced back at the man in the expensive suit. My boyfriend now, he's stable too, reliable, all the things I thought were boring about you. But I'm learning to see them differently, to see them as gifts instead of limitations. I'm happy for you, I said. I said, and meant it, sort of. I don't deserve your happiness from me. I don't deserve anything from you, but I wanted you to know that you were right. In that email you sent, you said perfect wasn't enough for me, and you were right. But it should have been. You should have been. We stood there in the gallery, surrounded by strangers and expensive art and the ambient noise of networking, and I felt a strange sense of completion. Not closure. I'd learned in therapy that closure is mostly a myth, but something like it. The end of wondering, maybe. The end of needing to understand. I hope your relationship works out, I said finally. I hope you figured out how to accept stability without destroying it. I'm trying. Really trying. She touched my arm, brief and light. And Marcus, thank you for leaving. I know that sounds backward, but you leaving was the kindest thing you could have done. It forced me to face what I'd done, to actually deal with my shit instead of just managing you while I figured it out. You're welcome, I think. She smiled, and it was genuine. Then she walked back to her boyfriend, and I walked back to my conversation about contract negotiations, and the moment was over. Sarah found me later, refilling my wine glass at the bar. Was that Miranda? Yeah. How was it? I thought about it, about seeing her again, hearing her apologize, understanding finally that her betrayal had been more about her than about me. About the fact that she was trying to be better, and I was trying to be better, and we were both doing it separately, which was exactly how it should be. It was fine, I said. Actually, it was good, like finishing a book I'd forgotten to read the last chapter of. Poetic, very unlike you. I've been working on it. My therapist says I'm emotionally constipated. Your therapist sounds fun. We laughed, and the evening continued, and life went on the way it does, messy and complicated and occasionally surprising. Here's something nobody tells you about divorce. The objects survive it. Long after the marriage ends, long after you've stopped crying or raging or obsessively checking their social media, the objects remain. The coffee maker you bought together, the books with both your names written inside, the photos you can't quite bring yourself to throw away, but also can't stand to look at. And in my case, the Tesla. I'd kept it in the settlement, fought for it, really, because it was titled in my name, and because I needed at least one victory that felt meaningful. But I hadn't actually thought about what it would mean to keep the car where I'd discovered everything, where Miranda and Blake had kissed and laughed and planned their deception. For the first few months post-divorce, I barely drove it. I took Ubers everywhere, or walked, or borrowed Sarah's car when I needed to go somewhere outside the city. The Tesla sat in my building's garage, charging automatically, waiting patiently like a faithful dog whose owner had forgotten about it. But eventually, practicality won out. I had a car, a nice car, an electric car that was better for the environment and came with free charging at work. It was stupid to pay for Ubers when I had transportation sitting unused in the garage. So one Saturday morning, about 8 months post-divorce, I got in the Tesla and drove. Just drove. No destination, no plan, just following the GPS toward wherever seemed interesting. I ended up on Highway 1, heading south along the coast, windows down, music playing, my music, my playlist, nothing we'd ever shared. The car drove beautifully. Of course it did. It was a good car. Responsive, smooth, the instant torque of the electric motor making overtaking effortless. I'd loved this car when I bought it, had been so excited to show Miranda, had imagined us taking road trips together up the coast to Mendocino or down to Big Sur. Now I was taking those trips alone. And it was fine. Better than fine, actually. I stopped at a beach near Half Moon Bay, parked overlooking the ocean, and sat in the car watching the waves. The Bluetooth was connected to my phone automatically. The same system that had betrayed Miranda's deception, that had let me hear every word of her confession. I could have gotten rid of the car, sold it, traded it in, eliminated the reminder entirely. But I'd realized something in therapy. Keeping the car wasn't about holding on to the pain. It was about reclaiming something that had been tainted, about proving that objects don't have inherent meaning. We assign meaning to them, and we can reassign it when necessary. This car wasn't the site of betrayal anymore. It was just my car, my transportation, my choice. I started taking longer drives after that. Weekend trips to wine country, solo camping excursions to Tahoe, a week-long journey up to Portland, and just because I could. Every mile I drove alone was a mile of new memory, new meaning, new association. The car became mine again. 1 year after the divorce, I was driving back from a hiking trip in Yosemite when I got a text from an unknown number. I was stopped at a gas station, yes, gas station for the bathroom, not for fuel, when I checked it. This is Blake. I hope it's okay that I'm reaching out. Miranda gave me your number. I wanted to apologize. I stared at the message for a long time. Blake, the ex-boyfriend, the oxygen to my foundation, the man Miranda had risked everything for. I should have deleted it, blocked the number, maintained the boundaries I'd so carefully constructed. Instead, I typed, "What are you apologizing for?" His response came quickly. For my part in what happened, for not stopping things when I should have, for not considering that there was a real person on the other end of Miranda's deception, for being selfish. "You want absolution?" I typed. "No. I want you to know I'm sorry. That's all." I sat in my car in the gas station parking lot, surrounded by families road tripping and teenagers buying snacks and the ordinary bustle of people living their lives, and I thought about forgiveness. Dr. Wong and I had talked about this extensively. She'd explained that forgiveness isn't about letting people off the hook. It's about releasing yourself from the hook of anger and resentment. It's a gift you give yourself, not them. But I wasn't angry anymore. I'd been angry for months, had nursed that anger like a flame that kept me warm through the coldest parts of grief. But somewhere along the way, the anger had burned out, leaving behind only ashes and acceptance. "I don't forgive you," I typed. "But I don't hate you either. You made selfish choices, so did Miranda, and those choices ended my marriage. But they also freed me to build something better. Thank you for saying that. Don't thank me, and don't contact me again. This isn't reconciliation, this is closing a door." "Understood. I hope you're well, Marcus." I blocked the number after that, then sat for another few minutes, breathing, processing. Then I got back on the road and drove home. 18 months after my divorce was finalized, I started dating again. Not intentionally at first. I told everyone, including myself, that I wasn't ready, that I needed more time to heal, to figure out who I was as a single person, to build a life that didn't revolve around partnership. But then I met Alicia. She was a consultant for one of my client companies, brought in to help them restructure their contracts department. We met in a conference room to discuss liability clauses, spent 3 hours arguing about indemnification language, and ended up getting coffee afterward because we'd talked straight through lunch. "You actually enjoy this," she said, watching me explain why Cascade liability was superior to joint and several. "Is that a problem?" "No, it's refreshing. Most lawyers I meet either take themselves way too seriously or are completely checked out. You're actually passionate about contracts. They're puzzles, finding the perfect language to protect my client while still making the other party feel like they got a fair deal. It's an art form." She smiled. "I'm Alicia, by the way. I should probably introduce myself properly since we just spent 3 hours together and I still don't know your first name. Marcus. Marcus Rivers. Well, Marcus Rivers. Would you like to get dinner sometime? Somewhere we can discuss something other than liability provisions?" I should have said no. Should have explained that I was fresh off a divorce, still in therapy, not ready to date. Should have maintained professional boundaries and kept our relationship strictly business. Instead, I said yes. Dinner turned into 3-hour conversations that ranged from childhood stories to career ambitions to our respective relationship baggage. Alicia had been divorced too, a brief marriage in her mid-20s that ended amicably when they both realized they'd gotten married for the wrong reasons. "We were best friends," she explained over Thai food, different restaurant than the one Miranda and I had frequent, different menu, different meaning, and we thought that was enough. That if we liked each other and had fun together, the romantic love would follow. But it didn't. We stayed married for 2 years trying to force something that wasn't there. And then we called it. "Do you still talk?" "Occasionally, we're friendly." There was no betrayal, no dramatic ending, just two people who realized they'd made a mistake and fixed it. I told her about Miranda. Not everything, not the Bluetooth confession or the evidence collection or the vengeful efficiency of my divorce proceedings, but enough. The affair, the discovery, the quick dissolution. "That must have been brutal," Alicia said. "It was, but it was also clarifying. I spent months wondering what I'd done wrong, what I could have done differently. And then I realized nothing. I didn't do anything wrong. She made choices, and those choices ended our marriage. That's a healthy perspective. It took a lot of therapy, she laughed. Same. I think therapy should be mandatory for everyone, but especially for people trying to date after divorce. We all have so much shit to unpack. We dated for 6 months before we made it official. Another 6 months before we said, I love you. Another year before we moved in together. We were careful, deliberate, refusing to rush even when it felt right, especially when it felt right. We're both gun-shy, Alicia explained to her best friend, who was frustrated by our slow pace. We've both been married before. We both know that feelings aren't enough. We need time to see if the infrastructure works. Infrastructure. It was such an Alicia word. Pragmatic, analytical, unromantic. I loved it. We built our relationship like we built everything else in our lives, with intention. We had difficult conversations early about money, kids, career priorities, division of household labor. We went to couples therapy not because we were struggling, but because we wanted to establish good communication patterns before problems arose. We created a life together that felt balanced. Two people with separate identities and shared goals, neither of us trying to be the foundation while the other became the oxygen. We were both the foundation. We were both the oxygen. And slowly, carefully, I let myself trust again. Not blindly, I'd never trust blindly again. My therapist called it earned trust, the kind that builds incrementally through consistency and transparency. Alicia earned my trust by showing up, by communicating, by being exactly who she claimed to be. 3 years after my divorce from Miranda, Alicia and I got engaged. I proposed on a hiking trip to Patagonia, a place neither of us had been, a memory we'd create together from scratch. We'd just reached the peak of a particularly brutal climb. We're standing on a rock outcropping, overlooking a glacial lake when I pulled the ring from my backpack. I'm terrified, and I said, because honesty had become our foundation. I'm terrified that I'll fuck this up, that you'll decide I'm not enough, that 3 years from now we'll be sitting in divorce lawyers' offices dividing our books and furniture. I'm terrified too, she said. But I'm more terrified of letting fear stop me from building something real with you. So that's a yes? That's a yes. We got married 6 months later in a small ceremony at City Hall, followed by dinner with 20 of our closest friends and family. No big reception, no elaborate planning, no stress about seating charts or centerpieces. Just two people who decided to try again. Smarter this time, more honest, more intentional. Sarah was my best woman. She cried during the vows, which surprised me. I'd never seen Sarah cry. I'm just proud of you, she said afterward, mascara running slightly. You went through hell and came out the other side still willing to try. That takes guts. Guts. The same word she'd used years ago when I'd first left Miranda. But it meant something different now. Then it meant having the courage to end something. Now it meant having the courage to begin again. 5 years after my divorce from Miranda, I received a letter. Not an email, not a text. An actual handwritten letter delivered to my home address. The return address was Miranda's handwriting, though the street was one I didn't recognize. Alicia found it first. We were married by then, living in a townhouse in Coal Valley, expecting our first child in 3 months. She handed me the envelope with raised eyebrows. Your ex-wife? Apparently. Do you want to read it? I thought about it. 5 years was a long time. Long enough that I barely thought about Miranda anymore. Long enough that my anger had fully transformed into indifference. She wasn't a wound anymore. Just a character from my past, no more significant than a college girlfriend or a childhood friend I'd lost touch with. Yeah, I said, I'm curious. I opened it while Alicia made tea and I read, Marcus, I know I promised not to contact you again, and I've honored that promise for years. But I'm getting married next month, and my therapist suggested I might want to write you one final letter before I do. Not to send, she said I shouldn't necessarily send it, but to write it anyway to see if there's anything left I need to say. I'm sending it because I think there is. I want to thank you. I know that sounds insane, thanking someone whose marriage you destroyed. But I need you to know that leaving me the way you did, with such clarity and finality, was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not in the moment, obviously. In the moment, it was devastating. But in hindsight, it was mercy. You didn't give me a chance to manipulate you into staying. You didn't let me explain or justify or convince you that it would never happen again. You just left. You saw the evidence and made a decision and executed it with such precision that I couldn't argue. couldn't negotiate, couldn't use my usual tools of managing and deflecting. For the first time in my life, I had to sit with the consequences of my choices. No safety net, no foundation to fall back on, no husband to stabilize me while I figured my shit out. Just me, alone, forced to actually do the work. And I did. I went to therapy, real therapy, not just crisis management, but actual deep excavation of why I sabotage good things. I learned that I have anxious attachment patterns from my childhood, and I learned that I conflate stability with boredom because my dad was stable and boring, and I watched my mom slowly die inside their marriage. I learned that I create chaos as a test. If you can survive my chaos, then maybe you really love me. I learned that none of that is an excuse, but it is an explanation. My fiance now, his name is Daniel, and he's stable in all the ways you were. But I've learned to see that differently. I've learned that stable doesn't mean boring, it means safe. It means I can trust that he'll be there tomorrow and next week and next year. It means I can relax instead of constantly testing whether he'll leave. I'm not the same person I was when I cheated on you. I've done the work. I'm still doing the work. And I wanted you to know that the reason I could do that work is because you refused to let me off the hook. So thank you. Thank you for leaving. Thank you for not accepting my apologies or giving me another chance. Thank you for showing me that actions have consequences and that some betrayals are unforgivable. I hope you're happy, Marcus. I hope you found someone who appreciates your stability, who understands that foundation isn't boring, it's essential. I hope you have everything you deserve, and I hope somewhere deep down you know that you didn't fail. You loved me the best way you knew how, and I wasn't capable of receiving that love. The failure was mine, not yours. Take care, Miranda. I read the letter twice while my tea grew cold. Then I handed it to Alicia. She read it, silent, then looked up at me. How do you feel? Vindicated, I think. She finally gets it. She understands what she did and why it was wrong and what it cost both of us. Do you want to respond? I thought about it. Part of me wanted to. I wanted to tell her I was happy, that I'd found my person, that I'd built the life she'd claimed she wanted me to have. Wanted to prove that I'd not just survived, but thrived. But another part of me recognized that response for what it was. Ego. The desire to win, to have the last word, to demonstrate my superior recovery. No, I said, I don't think I do. This letter isn't really for me, it's for her. It's part of her process, her healing, her preparation for her next marriage. And that's fine. I'm glad she's doing the work, but I don't need to be part of it. So what do you want to do with it? I looked at the letter, Miranda's careful handwriting, her honesty, her gratitude. It was the closure I'd never gotten during the divorce. The acknowledgement I'd secretly wanted that I hadn't done anything wrong. And I realized I didn't need it anymore. I think I'm going to keep it, I said. Not because I need the validation, but because it's a good reminder that people can change, that therapy works, that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their self-destruction. That's very mature of you. I've had a lot of therapy. She laughed, and we moved on to discussing nursery colors and whether we needed a glider chair or... And Miranda's letter was folded and filed away in my desk drawer with other artifacts from that period of my life. Our daughter was born 3 months later, Sophia Elena Rivers Chen, named for both our grandmothers. She arrived 2 weeks early, screaming her displeasure at the bright lights and cold air of the world, and I fell in love instantly. It was different from how I'd fallen in love with Miranda, or even with Alicia. This was fiercer, more primitive. The kind of love that would drive me to violence if anyone threatened her. The kind of love that made my previous understanding of the word feel inadequate. I held Sophia in the hospital while Alicia slept, exhausted from labor, and I thought about foundations. This child would need one. A somewhere base from which to explore the world. Reliable parents who showed up and told the truth and demonstrated that love didn't have to be chaotic to be real. She'd need to learn that stability wasn't boring. It was the thing that made adventure possible. I wanted to give her that. The gift of not having to create drama to feel alive, of not having to test whether people would stay, of knowing that her foundation was solid and wouldn't shift beneath her. I'm going to try really hard not to fuck you up, I whispered to her, and she blinked her unfocused newborn eyes at me, unimpressed by my promise. Alicia woke up and laughed when I told her what I'd said. That's every parent's promise. We'll all fuck them up somehow. The goal is just to not fuck them up in the same ways our parents fucked us up. What ways did your parents fuck you up? They were too perfect, too stable, too consistent, too healthy. I spent my 20s trying to rebel against their excellence and ended up in a boring marriage because I didn't know how to want anything more interesting than safety. And now I know that safety and interesting aren't opposites, that you can have stability and passion, that boring and reliable are different things. When did you figure that out? When I met you. She smiled, reaching for Sophia. You're steady but not stagnant, reliable but not predictable. You show up every time, but you're also willing to take risks, like hiking in Patagonia, like proposing on a mountaintop, like marrying someone with as much baggage as I have. Your baggage matches my baggage. That's why we work. Matching luggage, how romantic. We brought Sophia home to our townhouse, to the nursery we'd painted a soft sage green, to the life we'd built together with such careful intention. And I realized something. I'd spent 5 years recovering from my divorce, rebuilding myself, learning to trust again. But I'd also spent those 5 years learning how to be a better partner. With Miranda, I'd focused on being stable, on providing foundation, on being the reliable presence she could count on. But I'd confused stability with passivity. I'd thought that being steady meant never making waves, never asserting my own needs, never risking conflict. With Alicia, I'd learned that stability could be active, that you could be reliable and still challenge your partner, that you could be consistent and still grow. That foundation didn't mean fixed, it meant solid enough to build on. I'd learned that trust wasn't about never doubting. It was about choosing to believe despite uncertainty. That intimacy required vulnerability, which meant risking betrayal again, but doing it anyway because the alternative was staying numb. I'd learned that I didn't need to be perfect to be enough. One night, when Sophia was 6 months old and finally sleeping through the night, Alicia and I were having dinner, actual sitting down at the table dinner, a luxury with an infant, when she asked me something I hadn't expected. Do you ever think about your first marriage? Sometimes. Why? I just wonder how different you were then. Who you were before everything happened. I thought about it. Who had I been at 31, newly married, convinced that I'd found my person and figured out my life? I'd been naive, I decided. Not stupid, naive. I'd believed that love and commitment were enough, that if I just tried hard enough and was good enough, the marriage would work. I hadn't understood that you can't control other people's choices, that sometimes people betray you not because you failed, but because they're broken in ways you can't fix. I was softer, I said finally, more trusting. I assumed the best about people, believed what they told me, took things at face value. And now I verify, I pay attention, I trust, but I'm not naive about it. I know that people lie, that appearances can be deceiving, that sometimes the person you love most is capable of hurting you worst. That sounds exhausting. It would be if I didn't trust you. But you do? I do. Because you've earned it. Not by being perfect, but by being honest. By showing me who you are consistently, even when it's not flattering. By letting me see your worst moments and your fears and your flaws, and not asking me to pretend they don't exist. She was quiet for a moment. Then, do you think you would have been capable of this? She gestured around the table, at our life. If you hadn't gone through the divorce? No, I said immediately. I'd still be performing stability instead of actually being stable. I'd still be managing you instead of partnering with you. I'd still be the foundation letting someone else be the oxygen instead of understanding that we're both both. So in a weird way, Miranda cheating on you was the best thing that could have happened to me, I finished. Yeah, I mean, it was horrible and devastating, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But it broke me open in a way I needed to be broken. It forced me to examine all my assumptions about myself and relationships and what I was willing to accept. Have you ever told her that? That her betrayal was good for me? No. Maybe you should. Why? What purpose would that serve? Closure, maybe, or just honesty. And she sent you that letter saying thank you for leaving her. Maybe she'd benefit from knowing that in the long run, you're actually grateful too. I considered it. Part of me recoiled from the idea. Grateful? For being cheated on? For having my marriage destroyed? But another part of me recognized the truth in it. I was grateful, not for the betrayal itself, but for what I'd built in its aftermath, for the person I'd become, the relationship I'd found, the life I was living. None of it would exist if Miranda hadn't blown up my first marriage. I'll think about it, I said. I drafted the letter 3 times before I was satisfied with it. The first version was too vindictive, thanking her for cheating, emphasizing how much better my life was now, making it clear that I'd won. It felt good to write, but wrong to send. The second version was too generous, forgiving her completely, absolving her of responsibility, suggesting that it had all worked out for the best, so no harm done. That felt dishonest, like rewriting history to make everyone comfortable. The third version was honest. Miranda, I received your letter, and I want you to know it meant something to me. Not because I needed the apology or the acknowledgement, I'd already found peace with everything that happened, but because it confirmed something I've believed for a while, that you've done real work, that you've changed, that you're not the same person who betrayed me. I want to share something with you that I've never said out loud because it feels both true and uncomfortable to admit I'm grateful, not grateful for the affair and not grateful for the lying or the deception or the 6 months you spent using my car and my credit card to cheat on me. That was wrong and it hurt, and no amount of personal growth changes that. But I'm grateful for what came after, for being forced to examine myself and my patterns and my assumptions, for learning that stability isn't passivity, that trust isn't naivety, that foundation means solid rather than fixed, for discovering that I could survive betrayal and loss and still build something good. I'm remarried now. We have a daughter. I have the life I thought I wanted with you, except better because it's built on honesty and earned trust rather than assumptions and performance. And I wouldn't have any of it if you hadn't destroyed our marriage. So thank you. Not for the cheating, but for the clarity that came from how completely you shattered my illusions. Thank you for not being who I thought you were, because it forced me to figure out who I actually am. I hope your wedding is beautiful. I hope Daniel knows how lucky he is to get the version of you that's done the work. I hope you have kids and build the life you want and never feel the need to create chaos to feel alive. And I hope somewhere in your heart, you can forgive yourself. Because I have. Not because what you did was okay, but because holding on to anger about it was only hurting me. You've moved on, and I've moved on, and we're both better for it. Take care of yourself, Marcus. I showed it to Alicia before I sent it. She read it twice, then looked up at me. This is really generous. Too generous? No, just generous. Most people couldn't write this letter. Most people would still be angry or bitter or would want her to know how much she hurt them. I was angry. I was angry for months. But I'm tired of being angry, and I think she's tired of being guilty. Maybe we both deserve to move on without that weight. You're a better person than I am. You wouldn't cheat on me in the first place, so I think you're still winning the better person competition. She laughed, and I sent the letter. Miranda responded 2 weeks later, just a short email. Thank you. I don't deserve your forgiveness or your gratitude, but I'm grateful for both. I'm glad you're happy. You always deserve to be. And that was it. The last communication I ever had with my first wife. No drama, no big emotional scene. Just two people acknowledging that they'd both grown past who they'd been when their lives intersected, and it felt right. Here's what nobody tells you about recovery. It's not linear. You think you're doing great, and then something small, a song, a smell, a random memory, will punch you in the gut, and you're right back in that hotel room, crying over Thai food and evidence files. You think you've forgiven, moved on, built something new, and then you'll see your ex-wife's wedding photos on social media, because of course a mutual friend posted them, and you'll feel a complicated knot of emotions you don't have names for. You think you're healed, and then your therapist asks you how you're really doing, and you'll realize you've been performing wellness instead of actually feeling it. It happened to me about a year after I sent Miranda that final letter. Sophia was almost 2, Alicia was pregnant with our second child, and my career was thriving. By every external measure, I was killing it at life. But inside, I was struggling. Not with anything dramatic, no depression, no crisis, no catastrophic event. Just a low-grade anxiety that I was one bad decision away from everything falling apart. That Alicia would wake up one day and realize I was boring. That my stability was just a performance. that I was still that naive 31-year-old who'd smiled and said no problem while his wife drove off to cheat on him. Dr. Wong, who I still saw monthly, listened to me spiral and then said something that stopped me. Marcus, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop because last time you didn't see it coming. But you're not that person anymore, and Alicia isn't Miranda. I know that intellectually, but not emotionally. You still don't trust yourself. You trust Alicia, I can see that. But you don't trust your own judgment because Miranda's betrayal taught you that you can be completely wrong about someone. She was right. That was the wound that hadn't healed. Not the betrayal itself, but my lost faith in my own perception. Miranda had lied to my face for 6 months, and I hadn't suspected anything. How could I trust myself to see clearly now? So what do I do? I asked. You practice. You pay attention to the evidence, not paranoid surveillance, but healthy awareness. And when your gut tells you something, you listen. You didn't ignore your gut with Miranda. You overrode it. You chose trust over instinct. But instinct is there for a reason. It's pattern recognition, accumulated wisdom, your subconscious protecting you. You're saying I should be more suspicious? No, I'm saying you should be more trusting of yourself. Your gut says Alicia is trustworthy. Listen to that. Your gut says your marriage is solid. Listen to that too. But if your gut ever says something is wrong, don't override it. Investigate it. It was good advice, but hard to implement. How do you learn to trust yourself again when the evidence suggests you're terrible at it? The answer came from an unexpected source, Sarah. We were having lunch, our monthly catch-up, now with children in tow, Sophia and Sarah's son playing nearby, when she asked how I was really doing. I'm fine, I said automatically, like bullshit. You have your therapist's face on. What's going on? So I told her about the anxiety, the fear, and the persistent belief that I was failing to see something obvious that would destroy my life again. Sarah listened, then said, You know what I think? I think you're suffering from success. What does that mean? You did everything right after Miranda. You documented the betrayal, filed quickly, moved on, rebuilt your life. You were efficient and strategic, and you came out the other side with a better marriage and a beautiful family. But you never really let yourself be a mess. You never gave yourself permission to fall apart. I fell apart, I cried, I did therapy. You did manage falling apart. Controlled grief, strategic recovery, but you never just lost it. Never screamed or destroyed something or let yourself be completely irrational. That would have been counterproductive. Would it, though? Or would it have let you release some of the pressure you've been carrying for 6 years? I thought about that. She wasn't wrong. I prided myself on staying calm, on being rational, on managing the situation rather than being managed by it. But maybe there was a cost to all that control. What do you suggest? I asked. Go somewhere alone and scream. Rage at Miranda, rage at Blake, rage at yourself for trusting her, rage at the universe for letting it happen. Just let yourself be furious without trying to make it productive or constructive or healing. Just be angry. That seems childish, unproductive, not your style. Sarah smiled. Yeah, that's exactly why you need to do it. So I did. The following weekend, I told Alicia I needed a day to myself. She didn't ask why. One of the things I loved about her was her understanding that sometimes people need space without explanation. I drove the Tesla, of course, up to Point Reyes, hiked out to a remote beach where the nearest person was probably a mile away, and I let myself feel everything I'd been holding back for 6 years. I screamed, literally screamed at the ocean, at the sky, at nothing and everything. I screamed about Miranda's betrayal, about Blake's selfishness, about my own stupidity for not seeing it sooner. I screamed about the 6 months of lies, the credit card charges, the way she'd kissed my cheek before driving off with another man. I screamed about having to dismantle my life in 24 hours, about living in hotels, about seeing her in that lobby with divorce papers in her hands. I screamed about the unfairness of it all, that I'd done everything right and still lost. And then when the anger was exhausted, I cried. Not the controlled tears from therapy or the grief I'd allowed myself in measured doses. I cried like I'd wanted to cry that first night in the hotel room but hadn't let myself. I cried for the marriage I'd thought I had, for the wife I'd believed in, for the version of myself that had smiled and said, no problem, while his world collapsed. I cried until I had nothing left, And then I sat on the beach and watched the waves and felt lighter. Not healed. I was starting to understand that healing wasn't a destination, but a process. But lighter. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long, I'd forgotten it was there. And now I'd finally put it down. I texted Alicia, I love you. Be home for dinner. She responded, love you too. Take your time. Driving home, I thought about what Dr. Wong had said about trusting myself, about listening to my gut without overriding it with wishful thinking. My gut said Alicia was trustworthy. My gut said our marriage was solid. My gut said Sophia was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me, and our son, we just found out the gender, would be too. My gut said I'd survive the worst thing I could imagine, and I was okay. More than okay.